For those of you who don't know me, I'm Matt Harmon, creator of Reception Perception. I also am an analyst at Yahoo Sports. The bosses would really like me to tell you that. Anyways, so we're mostly going to talk about Reception Perception today and kind of how the idea got started, how eventually it grew from an idea into a business now, and everything that goes on there. So I'll just take it back to the beginning. This was end of the 2013 NFL season. I'd graduated from college, was not in a great life situation, wanted to change. My original plan was to go back to school to get a PhD in what I was studying in undergrad. Decided I didn't want to do that. I was really into I always loved to write. I always loved to kind of think about football. I always loved football. I wanted to marry the two interests together. So I decided, hey, I'm 22 years old. I'm not accountable to anybody. I was very, very single. Had no responsibilities. So I wanted to try to make it in the industry. I wanted to start a website and get it going, but I obviously had no connections. I did not play in the league, did not play college football, had no connections in media, whatever. So I knew I needed to stand out. And that was where kind of the original idea started formulating of Reception Perception. I started writing articles like everybody does, rankings and just film breakdowns, things like that. But for me, again, I knew I needed something to stand out, something to differentiate, because back then, and this is 2013, it was a crowded space. Now it's even more crowded. So, I mean, good thing I got it started then and not now, because that would be even more difficult to break in, as a lot of people know. So, again, back then, the idea for Reception Perception was, for me, wide receivers was one, a receiver position that it was just a position that I was gravitated towards, right? Because one, I didn't play it growing up. I did not have the body type to do that. And two, when we're watching games on Sunday, players run off the screen. You don't actually see them complete and run the route. But to me, playing fantasy, and you guys all know this, you're lucky if your receiver gets 8 to 10 targets in a game. That's a great week, but they're playing 60 plus snaps. They're running 30 plus routes. So I felt like there needed to be some way of evaluating what happened on all of those other plays. And obviously you can sit and read somebody's film breakdown and hear like, oh, this guy grades as a 6 out of 10 as a route runner, or this guy is really good at this, that, and the other. But I wanted to actually have a way to show that to people, and for people to be able to see that and then kind of take it as digestible information. So I went in and I just started tracking everything, charting every single snap. Over an 8-game sample is where I kind of nailed it down to. Originally, I was charting full seasons when I first got started out, and realized that was going to be a lot if I was going to undertake charting a ton of players. So after seeing how it kind of worked out, where it stabilized, that was where the 8-game sample mark came through. And really, again, most of it was about, at that point, the route data, success rate versus man coverage, press coverage, zone coverage, and then individual route charting as well. And the goal always has been to isolate the wide receiver play from surrounding variables. We know that obviously quarterback play is a big part of receiver production, offensive line, like is this guy protected? Does he have enough time to get the ball down the field to receivers? That's a big part of it as well. I want to try to strip those outside variables out and just focus on, does the receiver do what he is tasked with doing, the one thing he can control? How often do you run good routes, and how often do you get open to present a target to the quarterback? So that's been the goal of Reception Perception, and that was 2013 is when I first started coming up with the process. 2014 is when I first started tracking league-wide data. Originally was doing it on my website, thebackyardbanter.com. Eventually that brought me kind of on the radar of Sigmund Bloom at Football Guys, which is where I got my first kind of, and shout out to Football Guys, of course. Being a part of the Football Guys coaching tree is something I take a lot of pride in. So that was kind of the first freelance gig. Did a few articles for them, did a few articles in the Washington Post. Eventually ended up at NFL Network, ended up at Yahoo, and then worked with fantasy footballers for a long time. Obviously, super popular podcast. Those guys are pretty great as well. We had a good partnership for years, and eventually my bosses at Yahoo at the time, not my current bosses, so that I can say this, they really wanted me to kind of no longer work with those guys, because they were a big competitor. And when you're a contracted employee at Yahoo Sports, they want you focused on your work there, not helping out a competitor. I said, well, can I start my own website? Can I do it on the side there? And they were okay with that. That agreement worked out, and that's kind of how we have receptionperception.com today, and how it's its own business. So I think the main thing, though, to focus on here is, one, what is reception perception? What are we evaluating? And it's all me doing all the charting work. I have great people like Zach Miller here, who's in the crowd, helping me out from the back-end side of things. I have my business partner, James Coe. James Coe, who I could not run a functional business without. But for me, the actual evaluation process, I think, should always remain in my hands. And I've said to James Coe, you can pry the charting process out of my cold, dead hands, buddy. I will never give that up because I love doing it, And I think the actual goal of evaluating the receivers and trying to isolate them from surrounding variables has. I still find great gratification in it. It's my favorite thing that I do. So, I don't know. That's kind of the impetus of everything, and really the goal was that player isolation perspective, and how often we can get those guys. Try to understand what players are too, and that's, I think, an important point to bring up, because when you're creating content, you can talk about, hey, I like this guy, or he ranks this whatever for me. I think as fantasy analysts, the more you can actually understand the game and really what's happening on the field, I think the more credibility you get. It's not always going to work out right from a production perspective. We know that, again, all these outside variables are what's impacting production. But from the standpoint of just understanding how plays play out, where players line up, I said stuff about the wide receiver position back in 2013, 2015, 2016 that I would never say now, because I've spent more time on task researching the position and also seeing how my own data played out. I was charting stuff in 2013 and 2014 based on having 20 players in the database. You don't have enough understanding, enough of a sample to say definitive things, but you make content, people want to hear definitive things. So I'll give great examples like Juju Smith-Schuster in his second season, or after his rookie season. I wasn't that high on him from a player perspective, because he did not beat man and press coverage at the rate of most number one receivers. So wasn't that into him for his second season. I was I don't think he's going to have as big of a year as a lot of people think from a draft perspective, ADP and everything. He obviously had a great season. He had over 1,400 yards. And at the time, I still think my take ended up being good, because he kind of didn't age all that well. But anyways, the point is that he fit more in an archetype of player now that we're seeing most NFL teams use, is this big power slot archetype. And I think the thing there is that at the time, I didn't really understand that, he doesn't beat man and press at the same way of an Antonio Brown, but he's not really playing almost the same position as this guy, because what AB is asked to do is that perimeter receiver on the line of scrimmage, go against press man coverage. That is just, that's one role, but there's another role that you can have here, is that off-ball player who's moving around and mostly going against zone coverage. So there's different metrics in reception perception that better evaluate that player as opposed to this player. So there are different boxes to check. So again, that's just one example of something that I've learned throughout the process of how to just interpret the actual data that I'm charting. So I'm certainly not perfect. I certainly don't get everything right, but I think over the years, learning more and more about the position has been one of the things I'm just most grateful to be able to do, and that people like you guys care about this. I don't know. It's weird to me that I've been able to carve out such a great space, but I'm very grateful for it. So that's kind of the intro to what reception perception is, if people aren't familiar with it, kind of what I'm trying to do. And really going forward, I think the more that we can merge content from a fantasy perspective and an NFL perspective, I think the better. I think the more we'll grow fantasy. I think the more we will the more we'll get different type of people interested in it. Not everybody's going to want to get into content in a totally granular level like reception perception does, and that's totally fine with me. But I get a lot of people ask me questions about hey, why don't you chart tight ends, or who's charting running backs like you? And the answer is I don't chart tight ends, because I got enough on my plate with all the receivers. And two, I think someone else should be trying to do that. I think someone else should take on that endeavor. It's not easy work. It's not a breeze. It certainly takes a lot of time, but I think the more that people can carve out unique niches in the space and be kind of known for something. I don't love to say that I'm the receiver expert, or I'm the authority on this, that, or the other. But people invite me onto their shows, and I've been able to grow a career out of having a specialty and having a niche. And yeah, I have opinions on a lot of things in terms of NFL and fantasy and all that stuff, but the core of what I really love is working on receivers, and being able to be known for that has definitely been a great thing for my career and where I've gotten to this space, and I hope to only continue to be able to do that. So with that, I think I've talked to myself enough now. I'd love to hear from you guys if you have any questions, whether it is about reception perception, whether it's about receivers, whether it's about getting started in the space, or you know, what my future life looks like. I'll take any questions now from anyone, so if you have them, shoot your hand up and I'll get to you.
What about Kyle Pitts?
Get out. Yeah, a specific question about Kyle Pitts?
Well, I mean, he is going to be playing in a receiver position a lot, right, this year? I mean, at least that's what.
Yeah.
So, I mean, would you ever think about charting maybe like a different type of thing that ends up, maybe after he finishes the season with like 50% or more snaps like off the line, would you ever think about charting?
This is a good question, because I think it brings up, even though it is a minor troll question, I think that's fine. I wanted the first question to be a warm-up like this. No, so I think the thing that's interesting about Pitts is that, yeah, he's already played wide receiver and tight end. So like 50-50 would actually be a dramatic decrease in terms of his slot receiver and wide receiver snaps. He's done a lot of this already. So, and that does get into kind of the blurring lines. Like I've actually talked to Mark Andrews about this at one point, because he's played more slot receiver and wide receiver than tight end. He said, he's like, you actually probably should get into the tight end charting. I'm like, Mark, buddy, I'm a happily married man, okay? I'm trying to keep my marriage going, and you're adding more work to my plate. I do find that to be a little bit offensive, but no, I'm kidding about that. But yeah, I think that there are a lot of players blurring these positional lines now, and that's just the reality of it. I mean, Cooper Kupp, he, at the time when he came into the league in 2017 and 2018, he was playing probably the most singular wide receiver role at that time. Like, nobody was doing what he did. And even to this point, he plays in such a unique role where, I mean, this guy's like chipping edge rushers as he's going out to routes in the flat. And like sometimes there's a blurred line between, is he really a wide receiver or is he doing some tight end stuff? So the answer is probably no in terms of what I chart Kyle Pitts, but I do think it's something that I reckon with all the time of, you know, as these tight ends are getting more of a involvement in these slot receiver roles, even lining up out wide. I also think from a coaching perspective, and you know, far be it from me to tell like NFL coaches how to do their job, I think Pitts actually probably would be a more efficient player if he was used as a just traditional tight end, you know, because he can be a big physical specimen and move better than most wide receivers, but there's still some diminishing return from having a guy like that out wide as opposed to a just vertical wide receiver who can stretch out the defense and be more of a threat there. Like, I think they'll get more out of him in this offense, even if he still has like a split between this many snaps out wide, this many snaps in the slot. So he's definitely an interesting player to think about. The overall answer is no, though. I probably will not chart any tight ends as long as they have TE next to their name, just to keep my workload at a sane level and keep my wife engaged in our marriage. But yeah, no, I think it is an interesting question in terms of the positional designations.
How do you watch film? Like, are you watching game podcasts? Are you watching all 22 to get to some of these routes? Because what I found when I'm doing film analysis is like, I can't see the route sometimes, right?
Yeah, for charting with reception perception, it has to be all 22. Because, I mean, again, like I said at the top, when you're watching games on Sunday, the receivers literally run off the screen. Like, yeah, you don't see the route completed. Like, you can't judge from that angle, much less like, are they open against man or zone coverage or whatever. You're not even going to be able to see, like, he runs all the way out there. Is that a 9 route or is it a post route? You have no idea. That's why, like, if you're evaluating college prospects and you're watching safeties off of the broadcast angle, good luck, you know. And college film is actually much harder to come by than NFL film, because like anybody can buy NFL Plus, and you know, sometimes the product is what it is, but I mean, you can at least get access to the footage. With college, it's a little bit more difficult. So no, it has to be film. And I'm glad you asked that question, though, because yeah, I think some people don't know that, and don't know that there is a huge difference when you're actually watching that all 22 angle. You're able to see the entire, you're able to see every position on the field. You're able to see more, unless it was the old stadium that had that weird camera angle. This is for my film dorks out there. You'll definitely remember this. And you actually like, couldn't see the back end of the field. So sometimes I remember when I was like charting Bears receivers, like shout out Anthony Miller. He'd be like, was that a corner route? Did he actually you can't really see that break? So no, yeah, it's got to be all 22 film.
You kind of touched on my follow-up question a little bit, but yeah, I have a real hard time with like college guys, right? And it's always very reassuring when I'm analyzing these guys and I read reception, like word agreement. I'm like, all right, good, I got this one, right? But yeah, so how do you do the college? Talk to Matt.
Yeah, no, he does. Yeah, you can get some film access over there. But no, I appreciate that about the note of agreement. Like, like I said, I don't like to market myself as the expert on something or anything like that. I'm just a guy with an opinion, and I probably should have touched on this when I was talking. That I was rambling on there. That for me, I needed to kind of almost just absorb myself in any wide receiver resource that was available at the time. And there's like, if you want to learn a bit more about positions, it's way easier now to go on YouTube and like watch coaching clinics and watch guys run routes and watch people that like I wish I had more time, and Zach definitely wishes I had more time to do YouTube content and like actually do some film breakdowns. It would be great, but there are so many smart people breaking down film on YouTube that you can kind of learn about play structure and play design and routes and like what route concepts are trying to open up different things. So that's a huge critical part of it is learning that. And a couple resources I would mention if you do want to watch film and get more into it. Take Your Eye Off the Ball is a book by Pat Kerwin that Cecil Lammey, again, shout out football guys, always recommended back in the day. That was one of the first ones that I kind of threw myself into and learned a lot about the charting process and plays and how things open up. So I think before you, like, people jump steps here where you want to start watching film and you want to start evaluating players, but you don't know what the hell you're looking at. And even sometimes now, I'll send plays to guys that I trust and that do evaluation or work in the league or whatever. I'm like, hey, what's actually the goal of this and stuff like that. So it's always a learning process. Like you're never done learning, which is the fun part of this.
You kind of hit on like my first question, but I guess the second part is you found all these resources and you're learning about film, and like where I'm at, it's like if I talk to the people like me and Matt disagree on like Harmon of Yahoo or something.
Sure.
That's not really a lot, but making yourself look legitimate to other people. Like I'm just a dude who's played football and watched a lot of football. Not just like I played in high school and done this, and I help coach, I know a lot, but I have nothing that says anything. And like, yeah, I work for football guys, but it's like more of like where would other people look at my resources and say, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about, just putting it out there and looking legit, or having something like the Scouting Academy behind your name or something like that. What is the value, I guess?
And I don't think there's a perfect answer to this question. So I'll just say what my opinion is I don't think you need anything behind your name to look legitimate. I think you just need to put the work in. And like if you do put the work in, the great part about this space is that it is an accountability-based space. Like whether people, however people want to judge you or how correct you are on takes and things like that, your audience will tell you. Like, no grading system of rankings or, look at this person's old takes is really going to tell you as much as, does this person have a following and is it growing? Because if you're not good at this and again, you get the feedback from users. So it's just reps and it's time on task, man. And it's a patience endeavor too. Like I've been charting for reception perception for over 10 years now. And again, like I said, there were things that I said at the beginning of this process that I would definitely not say about receivers now. I also think it's the way people present themselves. I try to just, like, as simple as this sounds, I just try not to be a jackass. I try not to come in with like, how can I make this the most engaging or, how am I going to piss people off by saying this? Sometimes I'll fire off a sarcastic tweet just to have some fun. But if I'm trying to present like a real idea about a take, about a player or something like that, I want to come off as somebody that is credible. So not having like the most aggressive opinion you could possibly have is the way I would also present it too, is just, I don't think, definitely hot takes and stuff like that, or really aggressive opinions do get engagement, and sometimes it's not always good engagement. I would rather over time build up that credibility by kind of not just coming as a centrist opinion on things because, to be that way, but just if that's how I feel. Like, I always presented this, when I'm talking about Jameson Williams this season, we did a 40-minute podcast episode on Jameson Williams, which was just, outrageous it was totally sicko stuff. Like, this is a player that's not been a productive player in the league, and like most NFL fans are probably not thinking about, except people were really engaging with every Jameson Williams segment we did. And I even started off that 40-minute breakdown of his RP profile saying, honestly, I don't really have a strong take on this one. But I'm going to present the findings. I'm going to present like this, that, and the other. And like, I want you to react to it in like, if you thought this was a profile of a future superstar, like, cool, then you can have that opinion. But if you think it's like, oh, this sucks, and like, I don't want to bet on that, you can also have that opinion from it too. So I think like letting your audience sort of decide what the conclusion is, as opposed to like you saying, this is my conclusion and I need you to believe it too, I think also lends to that credibility, if that makes sense. Did that answer the question, or was that? No. Okay, cool. Go ahead. No, none of that was directed to you. Go ahead.
Multi-part question. Feel free to answer whichever part.
Cool.
But you do charting for obviously success rate, rebound percentages, command pressing zone. Have you ever considered adding anything else that you think would help you beneficial, or do you prefer to leave that to like your rich profile? Case in point, like you talked about Juju being a power slot, right? I think you also like Harmon of Yahoo kind of in the same boat.
Yep.
Because second part of the question, really also interested. Do you think Harmon of Yahoo has kind of grown out of that power slot role and do more just straight on the outside?
Yeah, let's do the second part first, because that's an easier question. I think yes, a little bit. He has become more of like an outside receiver, a little bit more of a flanker. I don't think he'll ever be, and I think, let me pause and kind of talk about the three receiver roles here for a second, and allow me to get dorky about this stuff. Hopefully I'm in a safe space for this. The X receiver is the guy that's, and this is general, and we can get a little more granular than this, but just general rules. The X receiver is like your old AJ Green type of player, far outside, on the boundary, all this stuff that teams are doing now in NFL offenses where they're pre-snap motion, moving guys at the snap. That player never does any of this. He's just outside on the line of scrimmage. Your slot player, we know, is where the slot is, in between the offensive line and all the other, like the outside receiver. The flanker is an outside receiver, but he's off the line of scrimmage, so he can move around pre-snap. This is old, outdated thinking. It doesn't really work in today's NFL offenses anymore, but typically you wanted that flanker or Z receiver to be more of a zone beater. And I do think, to bring it back to St. Brown, he has become more accomplished as that flanker receiver, so he can stay on the field for basically every snap. He's a player who's gotten better in each 3 seasons that I've charted of him in terms of beating press coverage, which I think is critical. So he has moved outside of that power slot archetype a little bit, but I still think that is the bread and butter of where he wins as a player. And that's an important thing when we're talking about receivers. It's an important thing when you're talking about any position, but specifically with receivers, because these roles are so different, is that we focus way too much on what a player can't do. And Amon-Ra St. Brown definitely, at this point so far, has not shown that he can be that X receiver and go win downfield routes. Who cares? Because he's really great at what he does. So that's something I've always focused on with reception perception, is yeah, he might not be able to do these things, but in the role that he plays, what he's asked to do by his team, if he's great at that, that's more important than the alternative. The second part of the question, presenting more information and everything, 2 thoughts here. One, I do chart alignment. That is on the site if you subscribe and you go to the sortable data. Thank you, Zach, for again powering the tables. You can see how often players in the games that I charted, how often they're outside, right, left outside, how often they're off the line of scrimmage, on the line of scrimmage. I also do track tackle breaking data in the open field. I actually have some thoughts on how we can change presenting that, and I've been meaning to tell you this for a while. So let's put a pin in this. I'm so glad you brought this up, because I've been meaning to talk about this.
I needed more work, actually.
Yes, you do, for sure. I am sorry about that. But anyways, yeah, so there's, I think, actually some ways I can present this in a different way that might be helpful for people. But the second thing about adding more, for example, and I don't know if this is what you're asking, you can help me if I don't answer this correctly, but like there are different types of zone coverage. You know, there's different types of coverage shells, like, you know, why don't I track base like success rate versus cover 2 versus cover 3? I do think there are ways that the data would be more, I don't want to say more useful, but definitely more, again, granular and more specific. But I don't want to lose people either. Like, I don't want to dive into a level too deep where people are starting to kind of glaze over or it becomes too complicated. I wanted there to be a good barrier of entry so that new fans and new subscribers can just get into that level. And like, certainly that's why our tiers of subscription on the site, the highest one is sicko tier. Like, if you are a sicko and you want to know about this stuff, like, we'll talk about it. Like, we'll present that information, but at the same time, I want to make it kind of accessible for everybody. So does that kind of answer? Cool, appreciate it. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so you talked about this a little bit when you recommended to take your eye off the ball, but can you just talk a little bit about where and how you were trained in all this to just learn the skill set? Because I know not everybody that's watching can even identify a particular play if the defense is in man or if it's in zone and all the different, you know, what was the actual name of the route that the receiver ran and how do you determine if he was successful? So can you just speak to that a little bit of like how you developed that skill set and how somebody else could learn some of that stuff if they were interested in doing something?
Yeah, see, you said the word development, and that is the key part here. Is this is not something that I just decided one day I was going to do and I just did it. I had to take months before ever putting any content. Like I said, I started charting probably around October 2013. I didn't put out the first reception perception article until June 2014. So, I mean, and in that month, in those months there, I was back testing the process and kind of like learning, like again, looking at resources, whether it's take your eye off the ball or different coaching clips on YouTube and stuff like that, learning as much as I could about wide receiver play, and testing myself as well. Like, hey, if I chart this game, what if I chart it again a week later? Do I come with the same conclusions, or is this something where it is like a hit or miss process? How subjective is it? Like, people run away from the word subjective and like, oh, your charting process is not objective. It's like, yeah, no, it's not. It is my subjective opinion. And that's fine. Like, if you have a different opinion about a player than me, go for it. Totally cool. But again, time on task really is the thing here. Like, I think if you're going to become inundated in a subject, you have to spend that time before ever putting anything out. And that's so counterintuitive to the way not just our industry thinks, but any industry thinks. It's like, put something out, put results out there. And I do think, like, if you're trying to develop as an analyst, like, you should put work out there. But if you're trying to kind of specialize in something, I don't recommend that everybody does this because it is a lot of work and it's not for everybody, and that's totally fine. I'm the weirdo cursed with this like obsession with charting routes. It's totally not for everybody. But if you do want to develop something like that, I think, yeah, spending time practicing it before you ever put any content out is the number one thing I would say. Is that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, are there specific resources you would recommend for like learning defensive alignments, learning what a successful route looks like? Just any specific resources you would recommend for
Yeah.
trying to learn those skills?
I think, one, Matt Waldman does a great job breaking down players on YouTube. He's somebody I would recommend. JT O'Sullivan, he used to play quarterback in the NFL. He has the QB School channel on YouTube. He does some actual like intro videos that I think are super helpful. I've even watched those just to kind of like freshen up on concepts that I might not be aware of. And definitely he has a whole like, what is cover 2? What is middle field closed versus middle field open? And like, if you hear me say that and you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Definitely go check out the video. He's somebody I would recommend, even if you don't agree with same with Waldman too. Like, even if you don't, and I think he would be okay with me saying this because we're friends. Even if you don't agree with like his opinion on players, same with JT, like you don't agree with how he views a quarterback, just watching somebody go through the process of watching film and talking about like what we're looking for and things like that, I do think is really important. Like, watching, he's a great resource just to kind of get both some of the jargon and the terminology, but also just the process of evaluation. I think like seeing that live is pretty cool. Yo, go ahead.
Next thing, you're kind of piggybacking off what you both were saying there. It's like, how valuable it is to like talk to other people about film, because like when I do rookie prospect season, I don't no offense, I mute you on purpose. Because I was like, I don't
No
want-
offense taken.
Yeah, I don't want to have like other opinions on here just so I can be like as objective as possible if I can be within myself. But then like afterwards, like I'm talking to people like Matt Cooper, Daniel Harmon, these other film guys, and then I can go back and say like, hey, maybe I missed something and do something like and find something else in the film. Or like as you know, in college, some of this film just comes out later. Like Roman Nunes out, I was like, I don't get it. And then like all of a sudden, like 5 new games drop. I'm like, oh, I get it. You know, type thing. How much value do you get learning from other people? And like, I guess it's like, at what point do you not like trust anybody? Because like for me, I have a couple of buzzwords I hear when you know, like if they can't identify like cover 2 or something like that, you know, maybe I can't, you know, hear too much. But I guess is what it is. I'm trying to learn from other people. When do I know that I can't learn anymore, or like when is their analysis leading into mine?
It's a great question, and I actually do the same as you. That I don't read anybody's work until I've like tried to get eyes on as many players during draft process as possible, which is almost impossible because there's just.
It's our job.
Yeah, right. Like you're gonna see something. I'm generally gonna have an idea of how someone feels about a player, but yeah, I will try not, especially people that I have a good relationship with. Like I mentioned, Matt Waldman. Like I try to not talk to him, you know, about players at all until after I'm done with my charting. Like I mean, last year, great example. Like I started just very briefly getting into the charting process a little earlier on the rookies, and I kind of posted some early thoughts, and he immediately starts hitting me up about Malik Neighbors and how he might have him as his #1 receiver. I was like, we're not gonna have that conversation yet. Let's put a pause on it. Let me get back to you in a couple of weeks after I'm done with this. So yeah, I try to do the same thing to kind of keep my vision, you know, straight and everything. I also think too, just I'm trying to think of the right way to say this. It doesn't really matter if people's opinions bleed into your own. I know that sounds weird to say that, but like the film is the film, and you know what you see is what you see. I think being honest with that and being transparent about how you view a player and what you see from them, like that's your conclusion. And I think if you go into that with a clear head, even if you know like, hey, this person I really respect thinks he doesn't beat man coverage, but to me, I'm seeing him doing it enough that I'm at a pretty good level here to kind of get a sense that I disagree with that opinion. Like that should be where, like, be confident and grounded in yourself. I think is the biggest thing there. You know, that's easier said than done for sure, but that's kind of I guess how I would view that. You know, go ahead.
All right. First off, I want to say thank you for pointing out J.T. O'Sullivan, UC Davis legend.
Shout out.
I wanted to ask this question.
Okay.
For Marina's Pride. So,
Me too. So we're in good company.
are you accounting for, or do you track player improvement in success rates over time? Do you see any kind of standard for younger players improving their success rates over time? Are you looking at that at all, and how do you account for that in your modeling? Like, how do you track that, and are you accounting for that?
For sure, we do see that. We see players, you know, improve with time. Not every player, and this is why I try not to have uniform rules about reception perception. There are certain things, like, and I say this on the show all the time, if you want like a quick and dirty intro into like who's good in reception perception, oh, you're an outside receiver and you beat man coverage over 70%, like that's good. We're interested in that player. You're a slot receiver, you beat zone coverage over 80%, that's good. We're interested in that player. But that is a, like I said, intentionally quick and dirty kind of like explanation of just how to value players and everything like that. But certainly there are guys that have improved over their first 3 seasons, and you know that can definitely happen. There are some players that don't. I try to not, and this is, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this answer too. There are, like, the best use of reception perception to me is within the individual player's profile. What I don't want people to do is go to the sortable data on the site and like click by best man coverage beaters and sort down and be like, okay, these are the 5 best receivers in the NFL or something. Like, no way, because I think the data is best used within like comparing how that player wins within the certain role that he's asked to do and what he's assigned to do, how well does he do it. So like within the profile, I think is best as opposed to like league-wide comparisons, which I think is part of kind of the answer to this question. The bigger thing is, yeah, it happens, improvement happens, and it's important to kind of to account for that for sure. And that's why I always say, like, you know, read the profile and listen to the podcast and kind of like get the explanation of it. Like, why did he improve? Because certain guys, like, it takes a inner position change for them to be in a spot that they're going to kind of shine better. Other players, they just get better, man. Like, these guys are pros. They're working hard at it. I think one of the most gratifying parts about charting players over the course of their career is seeing when guys like take that jump, make improvement. And because a lot of it to me, like, again, I'm going to shout out football guys for like the 100th time. So you're welcome, Joe Bryant. Like, one of the things I always remember Cecil Lammey and Sigmund Bloom talking about was like the glory should go to the players. Like, and we don't do it enough. Like, we are not having this conversation. We are not having a fantasy football expo. We are not having fantasy football without the players. So when a player improves like that, I think we were like, I want to give credit to that guy because he probably like busted his ass and put the work in to become a better player. So yeah, it's important to always look at that. It's important to not, you can project it before it happens, but you shouldn't write it in pen if that makes sense. Cool. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sort of wondering, I have an example for it. It's like, why would the Browns want Jerry Jeudy to be their number 2 wide receiver when Elijah Moore looks better, like, on the film? Or
This is a great question. I like this question a lot. No, keep going.
that was basically like what I was wondering, like, how do NFL teams like not see how good a player is sometimes, like, based on like what I'm looking at, like, that was basically my question. It's just the Jerry Jeudy versus Elijah Moore thing, and how NFL teams like don't see that.
You know, it's a great question because I definitely think that I like Elijah Moore as a player a little bit more than I like Jerry Jeudy. I think that Jerry Jeudy he's a good receiver. Like, I think we've gotten to a point where people say like, oh, he sucks. I mean, number one, I don't try to ever say that a player sucks because, like I said, glory to the players, and like we should show respect to these guys. But I do think he's been an inconsistent player to this point in the league. He's a guy that came into the league with a reputation as a great technical route runner. I don't think that that's translated so far in the NFL. I think he's been more of an inconsistent boom or bust type of route runner where you see the flashes of it sometimes, but you don't see it consistently. With Elijah Moore, he's a small receiver. Sometimes these guys do get stereotyped. That does happen. And look, I think it's one thing for me to sit here and say, like, you know, I think this guy gets open at this level versus man zone press. Like, I think he functions really well in this role, and like, why does the team not see it? Well, there might be a good reason that they don't want him in this role that I don't know. And, you know, some of it can be like a personality issue. Some of it can be maybe like we always talk about this too. At least I do, and nobody wants me to talk about it. But a lot of this stuff comes back to like how well are they going to do in the run game too. Like, these guys have to block. If you're a smaller receiver and you know you're going to play every single snap, you've got to be out there like being able to fit the run and you know springing holes open for the running back and things like that. Maybe there's a size issue that these guys don't want, but you know at the same time, I think sometimes guys do just get stereotyped in like, oh, small receiver, speed-based guy. He should be best fit in like a gadgety role. I mean, this is on my radar about like Jaden Reed with the Packers this year. Like, he has a great reception perception profile. He beats man and press coverage at a rate that I think he can play all 3 downs. I think he can play outside. But maybe the coaching staff disagrees with me, and he does kind of get pigeonholed in that Elijah Moore type of gadgety role, even though I think he can do more. It's the Curtis Samuel sort of contingent where I think he's been a guy that, like, I did a breakdown on YouTube about this. I've obviously talked about his reception perception profile for years. He beats man coverage, man. Like, I think he can play outside, but there's been multiple coaching staffs in the NFL that disagree with me. So maybe I am wrong about that, but also maybe, you know, we got to expand our minds about these players a little bit too. So that's a long way of me saying I don't know, but kind of a couple different explanations and theories there about it. Go ahead.
does the game-by-game volatility from like a player's performance ever necessitate more than an 8-game sample size? Like, do you ever feel like you're like seeing excellent flashes in some games and then just a player that you think is, for lack of a better term, struggling or underperforming? Like, does it ever feel like you're like, I need more? Like,
Yeah, and sometimes it's the opposite too, where after 4 games, I feel like I could have cut it off. You know, I feel like I probably could have stopped the same. Yeah, I've seen enough. This guy rocks. Like, do I really need that 8th A.J. Brown game to know that he's good at football in the year 2023? Like, probably not, but the standard is the standard. And that is the thing that I come back to with that part of it too, is that, yeah, even if there would be more games, and you maybe I'm sacrificing information there that would be valuable, but I think the fact that the process has always been 8 games and it has always been the same means that I can tell you like what this meant from 2014 to now, or where that fits into the archetype of this particular player and where that fits in with the league-wide database, so that, okay, we see this guy is over an 8-game sample, a 70th percentile success rate versus man beater. This is what those type of players look like when we're projecting them out in their 2nd or 3rd season. So that like standard is just very important to me. The only time I ever am like, this is definitely going to come back to bite me a little bit, is I wish I had more games, is when the player's injured, for sure. Like, if there's a stretch of where I know this guy is dealing with an injury and he might be struggling through that, it's just something I always try to note in the profile for the context part of it.
what goes into deciding which 8 games you, like, is it the best 8? Is it a random 8? Is it the same 8 for each, for like weeks 5 to 13? Like,
Yes.
I don't know.
I like this question. I like this question because now you get to get inside the beautiful mind here, or maybe the disgusting mind. I don't know. It depends on who you ask. Like, I always get the 3 divisional games, and I really don't have a good reason for why I do that, other than like I think there's a good familiarity of like who players are, and especially if it's that 2nd divisional game, I think they've probably, you know, they've at least watched film back on that player and maybe they have a better idea of how to defend them. So I always like to get the 3 divisional games. You know, so if I'm tracking a Packers player, for example, I'll get a game against the Lions, the Bears, and the Vikings. I get a mix of home and away because, you know, we talk about the Lions, right? They definitely play different indoors than they do outdoors, so I want to get some games there. And yeah, if there is a situation where the player has these like massive games, and the George Pickens effect, like he has these massive games, but he also has like 2 catches for 30 yards. I want to know why he was awesome in this game from a statistical perspective, and why it was a little slower this week. So I do try to get a mix production-wise of games as well. Jorge, what's up, buddy?
Do you get extra driving points like they're going against a really, really good corner?
Great question. We just talked about this actually on a RP mailbag on YouTube. No, I don't, and like 100 reasons why I don't do this. The one thing is like, how would I evaluate that corner without actually charting them? Which, non-starter, buddy. I mean, I'm not doing tight ends. I'm definitely not charting cornerbacks. Yeah, right. I could just keep going forever. But also, you know, I get feedback with, let's talk about Josh Downs for a second. Like, Josh Downs is a guy that has like a 93rd percentile success rate versus man. The first thing, I don't know, the haters and losers will say is like, well, yeah, he only did that because he lined up in the slot against weaker corners. Like, yeah, I know. Like, that might be an explanation why. And I trust you all. Hopefully, you all are readers and subscribers. If not, it's okay. No, welcome to the show. But I trust my readers and subscribers like to be intelligent, and like you guys are smart. So, and I try to say this on the show too. Like, yeah, he is a slot receiver, so he's going to get some easier matchups there. Like, him having a 93rd percentile success rate versus man is not as impressive as I'll go back to A.J. Brown. Like, A.J. Brown is a perimeter receiver having a 93rd percentile success rate versus man. We also know inherently, even if we don't say this, we know that A.J. Brown is going to get a different type of coverage matchup than a player like Josh Downs. Then again, that kind of comes back to my point about comparing players to themselves as like within their own profile as opposed to like league wide. What would be a very incorrect usage of reception perception would be like, yeah, I mean, and I'm not picking on Josh Downs. I love Josh Downs, by the way, big Josh Downs fan. But it would be incorrect to be like, hey, this guy Josh Downs has a 77% success rate versus man, and A.J. Brown has a 75%, which isn't accurate, by the way. None of that was accurate. But so he's better. Like, we know inherently that's not true. Like, I think the people that read our content and subscribe are smart, and like I trust kind of to be able to know that. And again, like how would I account for the cornerbacks in like a uniform sense? Would I use Pro Football Focus's grades? Would I use like defensive strength? Because then different corners on the team are going to be better. So it is kind of like a Pandora's box where just presenting the data for what it is, I think, and kind of trying to get some conclusions off that is better than opening that box, if that makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
So as much as I love all the receiver talk, especially about my Lions players, I wanted to ask more of a broader like business
Sure.
question and just better understand like what your biggest learnings have been starting this business, surrounding yourself with great people that are in the room or other relationships you talked about throughout this session. Like what would you recommend to somebody who is like early in their entrepreneurial journey or trying to make those relationships, whether in this industry or elsewhere?
Know what you don't know would be the number one thing, and know how you can get people around you to help you with what you don't know. For maybe newer people that trickled in, like, yeah, when it was time to, the contract with the footballers was ending and I was starting my own site, I don't think I knew at the time just how much was going to go into starting a website and collecting money, like a subscription-based site, and what all went into that. Luckily, I did have someone in James Coe who was a colleague and a friend that was like, hey, I would love to invest in this and really like help that you actually have a credible freaking business, man. So like, I don't know anything about that stuff. I have learned a lot over the years, but at the time it was at just a very, very, very base level, and having someone like that I could trust and I knew cared about this. If anybody cares about this as much as I do, that would be a shock, but I think he's definitely maybe number 2 or number 3. So yeah, having somebody too like Zach, who, I mean, I'm going to talk about Zach here for a second. Zach is a random person, comma, who just like hit me up on Instagram out of nowhere. And then people send me stuff all the time like, hey, I would love to contribute to your site, or I'd love to help you out. For the most part, I don't have opportunities and I don't have work to offer. This guy hit me up just at the right time when I was starting the website and I was trying to get old profiles onto the site and get all those charts made, and I had no time to do that. So I was like, actually, yes, I do have some things I need done. I'll give you X amount of dollars because I don't want anybody to ever work for me for free. And if you want to do this, like, let's do it. And here he is today, like. I know, but you will not work. No one will work for me for free. So yeah, that was like just good timing. So having people like resources that can actually help you, like don't try. My advice to people is don't try to be everything. Like I think it would have been insane for me to say I'm going to chart all the routes. I'm going to write the content. I'm going to make the charts. I'm going to run the business. I'm going to do like all these things. I would definitely have gone insane and probably would have not. Probably quit, like probably would have not done it. So having people that can support you in the areas where you are not strong, I think is critical, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I just got a question, man. Just like, you've been talking about it a little bit, but like, who are some of the people like that you really like look up to, like content-wise, like currently, and like do you use any of the content that other people put out? Because like I'm just thinking, like a lot of people like they create their own content, they like their own websites, and like. You use your own stuff 100%, or do you like take a look at like other people's content and analysis and stuff like that?
Oh hell yeah! I cite people all the time, and I'm a fan, man. Like I love football and I love football content, and I don't listen to as much fantasy content because my job is fantasy football, like 9 to 5, and I'd like 9 to 5. That's hilarious. I'm only working 9 to 5 and 40 hours a week for sure. But yeah, like I try not to get my opinions influenced by certain other fantasy content because, like we talked about, that does happen. But I love to hear people break down players and talk about film and all that stuff. So a couple resources, like when I first got started. Again, my 100th Football Guys reference. So again, Joe Bryant, the check better be in the mail, buddy. When I first found the Audible, the Football Guys podcast with Cecil Lammey and Sigmund Bloom and Matt Waldman, because I listened to Matt Williamson on ESPN, and he was on Sig's podcast, and I remember listening to him and be like, oh my God, I want to I want to think about football how these guys think about football, like on this disgusting, sick, nerdy level, all compliments intended there. So their content, I still think all those guys I referenced are top-notch. Waldman, Lammy, Bloom, they're still crushing it. He's no longer with us. Chris Wessling from the NFL Network was somebody who's like writing an analysis. I was a huge fan of his, and then luckily enough worked with him and could call him a friend. Before he unfortunately passed away, he was someone I really looked up to. There's so many people now, honestly, that are killing it. Like I could sit here and talk to you for an hour about people that are doing great, but for me, I tend to listen to like some real NFL shows, and then some fantasy content as well. But yeah, man, like there's so much good stuff. You could throw a rock and hit great podcasts and things.
Do you look for anything like on social for people that like aren't associated with a brand?
Yeah.
Like that, like do you have anybody that you look at now and you're like, I can see something coming with that person?
Oh, for sure. I mean, again, I don't want to say names just because I feel like I'll leave people off and I'll feel bad about it. But I think the biggest thing is like you can tell when people are kind of talking like right and have like a good sense about things. And this is something I talked with Ben Gretsch on our podcast recently, where he mentioned that a lot of people will like feel the need to cite like 5 stats to be making a point. And I only think I'm halfway answering your question, but hopefully halfway is good enough. When I see people on social media, and I don't think this is the wrong thing, because I think we all do this. I do this all the time, man. When I feel the need to say why this player is good and give you like 5 to 6 stats on it, when really those 5 to 6 stats are kind of just telling you the same thing. Like, this guy's good at football. So what I love is to see somebody who has an opinion and can say like, this, I think based on this metric, or just my opinion on this player watching him is good and is in line for opportunity or whatever, and I want to buy in on that. And like simple, cut and dry explanations about things, I think are almost better. And I'm not good at simple, cut and dry explanations, so it's something I'm still working on. But when I see people do that, I'm like, yeah, I think that's somebody to keep an eye on. If that makes sense. Yeah. Go ahead.
So we're seeing some profiles coming out in the rookie draft where they don't have a lot of route trees, like it's just not developed from what they're being asked to do.
Mm-hmm.
What are some red flags or things that you look for in their game that kind of give you more evidence that you personally want to have them on your fantasy teams, because maybe the data's not there, but you still have eyes on them? So what are you looking at that's not showing up in your profile?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is where they end up, right? So great example from this past year's class. I think this is a player who kind of fits in this, but you correct me if I'm wrong. Like Brian Thomas Jr. from LSU, where he obviously some certain metrics he didn't check boxes. One, because he's playing across another great receiver in Malik Neighbors, with a quarterback who's going to take off and run. Like statistically, you're not going to have the same impressive box score that some of these other guys are. But even from a reception perception standpoint, he ran a limited route tree. He ran a 9-route, slant route, curl route on 47% of his routes. Like that is not a very expansive route tree, if that makes sense. So I think he was going to need to go to a spot where he was not immediately day one plopped into like a number 1 outside receiver role. There were probably better spots than Jacksonville to go to, but I think that's a pretty good one because they have 2 players from a tight end and a slot receiver perspective, and like we talked about the Kyle Pitts thing. Like Evan Ingram has a candidacy to be charted as a wide receiver sometimes. So those 2 guys are going to be able to absorb a lot of early volume. Gabe Davis is a volatile player, but he is still a guy that can be that X receiver, run a bunch of routes from the outside, and has been again, people bag on Gabe, and I've definitely been lower than consensus on Gabe at times. Not currently, but like back when he was kind of first breaking out with the Bills or the big playoff game and everything. But he's a viable NFL receiver, so he doesn't have to be thrown to the wolves earlier. So I think that's like a way for me to say like, okay, maybe he doesn't come on right away week 1 and is an immediate like a productive player, but over time he has the ability to develop slowly and not be leaned on too much right away. Because I think so many times with player development, guys don't fail; they are failed. That's certainly true of the quarterback position, and I think it's true at wide receiver too. Sometimes we gotta like give some patience with these guys as well. If that makes sense. Go ahead.
Do you, the Jerry Judy Elijah Moore thing got me thinking. Do you know of any NFL teams that use reception perception as part of their player evaluation process?
No.
We checked for who was the Bills?
Yeah, it was. We did joke about the Bills. Yeah, right. They had Steph Diggs, reception perception guy. John Brown back in the day, reception perception guy. Khalil Shakir was kind of underrated prospect too. So yeah, maybe there. I don't know. Hard to say. I'll take one or two more if we have them. If not, we'll close out here.
Kind of a Monte Adams and exciting question. Age curves, age cliffs.
Oh.
What are the benchmarks that you're looking for a guy who maybe solely head to the Hall of Fame?
And it does depend on the individual player, because the benchmarks for a guy like Cooper Kupp are different than the benchmarks for a guy like Davante Adams, just because they play very, very different roles. Like in my dream world, my utopia state, which this is so stupid to say, we wouldn't even, like, if we're making lists and rankings, we wouldn't rank a guy like that, these two guys together. We'd put them like separate, because I think they almost basically play different positions. That definitely first dawned on me with the Antonio Brown Juju analogy that we talked about earlier, where by the end of that year, there were analysts that were like, man, is Juju better than Antonio Brown? Because he has higher yards per yards per target, yards per out run, yards after catch per reception. It's like, why are we even comparing these guys? They might as well play two different positions. So it kind of depends on the individual player. I think the number one thing I think from a Hall of Fame perspective is sustained and consistent greatness. And if you have sustained and consistent greatness in reception perception over a long period of time, yeah, I definitely think we can make a case for a gold jacket for these players for sure. Go ahead.
For your dynasty rankings, you have Garrett Wilson and then Debo in the same tier. Do you ever think about making those tiers a little bit smaller?
Yes. In fact, that is something I need to do. So that's on my to-do list before week one, is to split those tiers up. Because the more, honestly, at different times, in my career, I wanted the tiers to be more expansive. I wanted to kind of represent that, hey, there's a large swath of players that you can pick from and probably be in the ballpark of the same range of outcomes. I think now there's so many good wideouts, there's so many good receivers and functioning in different roles too, that I do think I need to be a little more specific with those. So yeah, that is something I've thought about, and I do need to get done. It's on my to-do list before week one. Last one, and then we'll close it out.
That's a good one to close out on. Just a question. I want to be careful, of course, about plagiarizing or stealing any work. Are you allowed to tweet the charts or no?
Yes, people can tweet the charts. What I would love if you do is in that specific tweet where you put the chart, or in the next one, because we can thread these bad boys together, just put a link to the website, where you got it from. I designed the site specifically that way. So yeah, if you want to tweet the chart and be like, whoa, or yikes, just throw that link up there too. So, because here's the thing, and the reason I say this is not just because, I do want people to find the site. A lot of people don't know where the hell this comes from. I have actually had people say to me, I didn't know that you were the guy that did reception perception, which I know seems crazy to most people, but it happens. So yeah, ultimately, I do want people to go to the site. I want people to subscribe. I want people to follow my stuff. But yeah, I would do it for other people. So I would, I'm not going to come and knock on your door and fight you if you don't, but I would appreciate it if you did.
I just want to make sure because I know you have paywall, so I didn't want to put anything out there that's
I appreciate you, and I appreciate all of you for coming. Thank you so much. I appreciate Bob Lung for letting me do this. I can't believe we got up here and just talked about receivers and business and Zach Miller all for an hour. So thank you guys. Really appreciate the support, and yeah, let's get out of here, man.